The doctor's tale, a whisper in the night. Hospitals are enigmatic places, brimming with untold stories that linger in the sterile air. As a seasoned doctor, I'd grown accustomed to the murmurs shared in dim corridors or over hurried coffee breaks during grueling night shifts. These tales, often dismissed as folklore, carried a weight I never fully appreciated until I became entangled in one myself. It was an unremarkable evening on the medical floor, where I was pulling a night shift. The ward was unusually quiet, with only a few patients under critical care. I cherished these rare moments of calm, a reprieve from the usual chaos. My rounds led me to check on Mr. Peterson, an elderly man who had been comatose for nearly 2 weeks. His condition was stable, but hope for recovery had faded. His family had bid their farewells, and we, the staff, braced for the inevitable. Earlier that evening, I'd recorded his vitals, routine and unchanged. Yet an inexplicable unease gnawed at me as I approached his room. The hospital's usual symphony of beeps and hums filled the air, but tonight, a peculiar undertone wove through the soundscape. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper, like a secret shared just out of earshot. I slowed my steps, straining to discern words, but the sound dissolved as I paused. Shaking off the odd sensation, I attributed it to fatigue and pressed on, mentally reviewing Mr. Peterson's chart to anchor myself. Pushing open his door, I froze. Mr. Peterson was awake. His eyes, once dulled by his prolonged unconsciousness, now glinted with a strange awareness as he stared at the ceiling. His face, etched with the stillness of coma, held an expression I couldn't decipher. Serene, yet unsettling. "Mr. Peterson?" I ventured, my voice steady despite the jolt of surprise. He turned his head slowly, his gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that sent a shiver through me. For a moment I doubted he recognized me, but then he nodded faintly. "Doctor," he rasped, his voice a fragile thread barely audible in the sterile room. "She's leaving us tonight." I blinked, caught off guard. "Who's leaving, Mr. Peterson?" His eyes drifted past me, fixing on a point just over my shoulder. A chill prickled my spine, but I resisted the urge to look behind me. His expression softened, almost peaceful, as if he were confiding a profound truth. "She's waiting," he murmured, his gaze returning to the ceiling. Confusion gripped me. I'd witnessed patients emerging from comas with disorientation or hallucinations, but this was different. His words carried a quiet certainty, as if he were privy to something beyond my comprehension. Swallowing my unease, I noted his condition in his chart, my pen trembling slightly. "She's leaving us tonight," echoed in my mind, an unsettling refrain I couldn't shake. I checked his vitals, administered his medication, and prepared to leave, but his voice stopped me again. "She's here," he whispered, his eyes fixed on the doorway. I followed his gaze, expecting to see a nurse or visitor, but the threshold was empty, framed only by the dim hallway light. "Who's here, Mr. Peterson?" I asked, striving to keep my tone calm. He didn't answer, his stare unwavering, as if something or someone stood just beyond my sight. A knot tightened in my stomach. I stepped closer, hoping to break his trance, but his expression remained unchanged, locked on the void. Reluctantly, I backed out of the room, casting one final glance at him before closing the door. His words clung to me like a shadow as I made my way down the corridor. At the nurse's station, I found Linda, the head nurse, organizing charts for the morning shift. Unable to suppress the urge to share, I recounted Mr. Peterson's startling awakening and his cryptic words. "Linda, has he ever been lucid before?" I asked, aiming for nonchalance. Her brow furrowed, a flicker of concern crossing her face. No, he's been unresponsive since admission. Why? What happened? I hesitated, wary of sounding irrational. He was awake just now, talking. He said someone was leaving tonight and that she's here, staring at the door like he saw someone. Linda's expression shifted, a mix of curiosity and unease. She glanced down the hall toward Mr. Peterson's room. "You're not the first to hear something like that," she said softly. "The night staff, they talk. Patients near the end sometimes say things, like they sense something we can't. They mentioned seeing someone waiting." Her words sent a chill through me. I'd dismissed such stories as medical folklore, but her tone carried a gravity that made doubt difficult. "Anyone else on this floor mention it recently?" I pressed. She nodded, her gaze distant. "Room 217. The woman there passed last night. She told a nurse someone had visited her, but the hallway was empty when they checked." The coincidence unnerved me. I hadn't been on duty the previous night, but the thought of another patient experiencing something similar twisted my nerves. Determined to focus, I continued my rounds, but the hospital's sterile corridors felt heavier, as if an unseen presence lingered in every shadow. Each empty room, each darkened corner, seemed to watch me. At 3:12 a.m., a soft beep from a monitor down the hall broke the silence. The skeleton crew left the floor eerily quiet, the dim lights casting long, wavering shadows. I returned to Mr. Peterson's room, driven by an instinct I couldn't name. As I entered, I was stunned to find him sitting up, fully alert, his eyes bright with a clarity that defied his weeks-long coma. A nurse stood by his bedside, adjusting his pillows with practiced ease. "Mr. Peterson, you're awake," I stammered, masking my shock. He smiled faintly, looking remarkably at ease, as if he'd merely woken from a nap. "Feeling pretty good, Doc," he said with a chuckle. "These nurses know how to take care of a man." The nurse nodded, confirming his stability. Everything seemed routine to her, but to me the scene felt surreal. "How are you feeling?" I asked, still grappling with his transformation. "Like I've been out for years," he replied, his tone light. "But everything's normal now. Just waking up." He paused, studying my face. "Something wrong?" I hesitated, then pressed on. "Earlier tonight, you mentioned someone leaving us. Does that ring a bell?" His brow furrowed, genuine confusion in his eyes. "Earlier? Doc, I don't remember saying anything like that." I nodded, attributing it to the fog of his recovery, but his earlier words, spoken with such certainty, haunted me. The shift continued uneventfully, and when I checked on him later, he slept peacefully, the picture of recovery. Yet around 5 a.m., a page from the ICU pulled me away. A woman in her late 40s, battling chronic illness, had passed in the early hours. Her room was adjacent to Mr. Peterson's. The realization hit me like a cold wave. She's leaving us tonight. Had he sensed her passing? The hallway felt heavier after her death, as if the air itself mourned. When Mr. Peterson was discharged days later, he showed no recollection of his eerie prophecy, leaving me to wonder if he glimpsed something in the liminal space between life and death. Something I'd never fully understand. Hospitals at night are a different beast. The sterile hum of machinery and the antiseptic scent create a disorienting atmosphere. But when darkness falls, the silence becomes oppressive, amplifying every sound and shadow. I was admitted for minor surgery, a routine procedure requiring a few days of observation. My room, tucked at the end of a secluded hallway, felt tranquil at first, far from the bustle of the main ward. But as night settled in, that isolation turned suffocating. On my second night, Unease crept in. I drifted in and out of sleep, caught in that hazy state where reality blurs. The hospital's sounds, distant beeps, the hum of ventilation seemed louder, more intrusive. Then I heard footsteps, slow and deliberate, with long pauses between each step. At first I assumed it was a nurse on rounds. Their cautious tread meant to avoid waking patients. But the rhythm was wrong, too heavy, too uneven. I tried to ignore it, turning over in bed, but the steps stopped just outside my door. Silence followed, thick and unnerving. I stared at the door, expecting a knock or the creak of it opening, but nothing came. The clock read 3:07 a.m. My rational mind insisted it was nothing, a nurse pausing perhaps. But then I saw it. A shadow beneath the door, sharp and human-like, cast by the hallway's dim light. It didn't move, as if someone stood frozen, watching. My pulse quickened, but I clung to logic. Maybe a staff member was on a call, distracted. Yet the shadow remained, motionless, for what felt like an eternity. I sat up, my breath shallow, staring at the shape. It wasn't a trick of the light, it was too distinct, too deliberate. After agonizing moments, the shadow receded, melting into the darkness. I exhaled, convincing myself it was my imagination, amplified by medication and the hospital's eerie ambiance. The next morning, I mentioned the shadow to the nurse checking my vitals, expecting her to laugh it off. Instead, her face tightened. "Probably just a night staff member," she said, her tone clipped as if rehearsed. Her dismissal only deepened my unease. Throughout the day, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, my eyes darting to the hallway with every passing sound. That night, the tension returned as the lights dimmed. I lay awake, dreading the clock's approach to 3 a.m. At 3:02, the footsteps returned. Slow, dragging, deliberate. My body tensed, every nerve on edge as they paused outside my door. The shadow reappeared, darker, more defined, as if pressing against the crack beneath the door. The air grew heavy, almost suffocating. I stared, unable to look away, as the shadow shifted slightly, then vanished into the darkness. In the morning, I overheard a patient across the hall, Mr. Wilkes, speaking to a nurse. His words stopped me cold. The shadow in the hallway. He'd seen it too. My heart raced. This was no hallucination. I pressed the nurse for answers, but she brushed it off, claiming Mr. Wilkes was confused by medication. Her evasive glance told a different story. That night, I resolved to stay awake, my bedside light on as a feeble defense. Exhaustion eventually won, but at 3 a.m. I jolted awake, the air thick with dread. The shadow was back, more vivid than ever, pressed against the slightly ajar door. It seemed to pulse, as if eager to cross the threshold. My heart pounded as it glided down the hall, pausing at Mr. Wilkes's door. To my horror, it slipped through the closed door, disappearing into his room. I lay frozen, listening for any sound, but the silence was oppressive. In the morning, I learned Mr. Wilkes had passed away in the night. The nurses called it peaceful, natural, but I knew better. Overhearing two nurses whispering about 3 a.m. shadows at the end of the hall confirmed my fears. Something unnatural haunted this place, targeting the vulnerable in the dead of night. When 3 a.m. came again, the shadow returned, creeping toward my door. I held my breath, watching it linger, testing the barrier. The cold dread was overwhelming, but as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. I was discharged the next day, fleeing that hospital with a lingering fear. Even now, the memory of that shadow haunts me, and I wonder if it still waits watching for its next visitor. As a night nurse, I'd grown accustomed to the hospital's peculiarities, its creaks, its silences, its ability to unsettle. Years on the job had dulled my sensitivity to the strange, but some nights left marks that lingered. One such night etched in my memory began like any other on the quiet ward. Room 216 housed Mr. Connors, an elderly man admitted after a severe stroke. Comatose since arrival, he was a fixture of my rounds, his shallow breathing a constant rhythm. His prognosis was grim. He existed in a liminal state, neither fully here nor gone. I'd check his vitals, adjust his IV, and ensure his comfort. But his room always felt heavier, as if the air itself carried a burden. That night, the hospital was colder than usual, a bone-deep chill that my sweater couldn't fend off. Around 2 a.m., I approached room 216, my breath visible in the frigid air. The hallway was silent, the fluorescent lights casting stark shadows. As I entered, the cold intensified, like stepping into a winter storm. I shivered, blaming the air conditioning, and focused on my tasks. Checking Mr. Connors' IV, I felt a prickling sensation, as if unseen eyes watched me. His breathing was so faint I leaned closer to confirm it. Then, without warning, he sat up, his eyes wide and locked on mine. My heart stopped. "He's coming for me," he whispered, his voice hoarse but certain. I froze, unable to process the suddenness of his movement. "Who's coming?" I managed, but his eyes fluttered shut and he slumped back, his breathing resuming its faint rhythm. I stood there, my mind reeling. Was it a reflex? A hallucination? His words, "He's coming for me," echoed, chilling me more than the room's cold. Shaken, I returned to the nurse's station, my face pale enough to prompt concern from a colleague. I brushed it off, blaming the cold, but I couldn't shake the encounter. Compelled to check again, I returned to room 216 and found his bed empty. The sheets were warm, as if he'd just been there. Panic rising, I alerted the staff. We searched the floor, checking every room, closet, and stairwell, but Mr. Connors was gone. Desperate for answers, we reviewed the security footage. It showed Mr. Connors lying still, then a figure, a tall man in dark clothing, gliding into the room. He lifted Mr. Connors into a wheelchair with eerie precision and wheeled him out, unnoticed by alarms or staff. The footage ended with them vanishing from the hospital. The police were baffled, as were we. Days later, they identified the man as Mr. Connors' son, who had honored a promise to keep his father from dying in a hospital. They were found in a remote farmhouse, where Mr. Connors passed peacefully 2 weeks later. Yet his words, "He's coming for me," still haunt me, as if he'd known his fate all along. Night shifts in hospital security are a test of nerve. The stillness, the flickering lights, the hum of machinery, it all creates an eerie backdrop. I took the job expecting routine patrols, but the hospital had other plans, especially near the morgue. Assigned to the basement one Wednesday night, I braced for the usual discomfort. The morgue was a place I avoided, its cold sterility unsettling even on good days. That night, the basement was colder, the air biting through my uniform. At 11 p.m., I noticed a flickering light near the morgue entrance, pulsing in time with my steps. I dismissed it as a faulty bulb, adding it to my report. As I neared the morgue, a faint sound stopped me, a whisper, indistinct but chilling. I paused, listening, but only the vent's hum answered. Shaking it off, I continued my sweep, checking locks and doors. Then I heard it again, clearer. "Derek." My name spoken in a weak, pleading voice. My heart raced. I told myself it was the building's quirks. but the voice returned unmistakable. "Derek, please." Against my instincts, I entered the morgue. The dim light revealed nothing amiss, empty tables, closed drawers. But a rhythmic tapping echoed, steady and deliberate like fingers on metal. My flashlight trembled as I scanned the room, finding nothing. Then a cold breath grazed my neck, sharp and icy. I spun around, my beam cutting through the shadows, but I was alone. The tapping resumed, louder, from the room's far end. Fear rooted me in place, but the silence that followed was worse. Then footsteps, slow, hesitant, approaching the morgue. They grew closer, echoing off the tiles until they stopped just outside. I fled, not looking back until I reached the safety of the main floor. I tried to rationalize it, stress, imagination. But the voice, the chill, the footsteps were too real. I avoided the morgue after that, but other guards' stories of whispers and flickering lights confirmed my experience. Something lingered in that basement, calling out, waiting. I never returned to find out what. Hospitals are more than places of healing. They're liminal spaces where life and death intertwine. These stories of whispers, shadows, and vanishings linger in the quiet hours, a reminder that some things defy explanation. If these tales unsettle you, stay vigilant. In the stillness of the night, it's what you don't see that may haunt you most.